Welcome back, fellow armchair generals. This is Gamer 1745 here. We're playing as the United States. And we need to stop this attack. Okay, it's a major defeat. Yeah, I know, but we're getting there to be shattered. We're not getting enough supplies in. We're just not functioning well enough. But we're doing okay-ish here. You come like that. Let's see if we can take this point. Hello, Sebastian. How you doing? And I remember an interview of an admiral of the IGN in the 2000s. What was learned from World War II? Three things. Never get into war with the U.S.A. Two, never... Oh, I got to look over at YouTube because part of that is cut off. Let me see. Okay, we did just save it just in case something does go wrong with this. Let me open up the YouTube window here. No, it doesn't. No. Did you get past? Can you redo number 3 there, Paul? I get 3 never and then a bunch of dots. If you could add to that, I would greatly appreciate it. If you could cut and paste it. Never get in a war with USA. Never get in a war. Oh, and probably never get in a war with USA. Yeah, but it's also I think they have learned that we make a good allies. We because of our democratic elements. We are not a democracy, people. The United States is not and has never been a democracy. We are a constitutional federal republic with democratic representative elements in it, most assuredly. But we have a constitution. We are a republic. It is not, democracies are majority rules. We need to have strong minority consent or overwhelming majority agreement on something to do major changes in our system. But because we can vacillate between political parties, sometimes we'll say, yeah, South Vietnam, yeah, we're leaving, but don't worry. If you shoot 100 rounds of, 105 millimeter ammunition or whatever, we'll replace another 100 rounds for you. So if you keep fighting the communists, we wish you the best. We've trained you up as best we could for however many years. We wish you the best. And we'll keep supplying ammunition for you. Well, 2 years later, North Vietnam invades, and the U.S. doesn't do anything. Oh, and also promise, well, we have carriers and airplanes. We can come and bomb invading forces. Yeah, no. Never go into the war with you. Okay, great, Paul. Yeah, I get it. And Afghanistan, we trained an army that was trained to fight under American, the umbrella of American air superiority. And I believe, I don't know, but I believe the idea was when Trump was going to withdraw, he was going to leave Bagram Air Base as American controlled. Yes, some troops patrolling the outside of Bagram Air Base, but withdrawing all other, because we had troops before, in Helmand province and places like that. We had troops around, but withdraw all of those, but leave American air support to support the Afghanis. Well, when Biden withdraws, one of the first places they leave is Bagram Air Base, and they're planning on doing the withdrawal from Kabul airport, which is not under American control. But then they also withdraw American air superiority. And I don't know why they decided to do all this from a group that supposedly wanted to continue to there, in which is still has troops in Iraq, in my understanding, and definitely has lots of troops still in Syria, but pulls out in such a way that Afghanistan collapses. So America can be a bit of an unreliable ally. And there are more reliable allies out there in the world. But I don't know of a more effective ally when they are doing what they're trying to do. If you have America as your ally, like right now in Ukraine, we are feeding Ukraine a lot of information, I think mostly from satellites. My understanding is we have people on the ground. I don't know whether they would be considered U.S. Army soldiers or former soldiers. I don't know what agency, the CIA or somebody else they may be working for, but I think they're holding the laptop and they're popping the laptop open and pointing, see, right here is an artillery battery. Right now, live, our satellite spots it. Oh, good, the Ukrainian says, and the Ukrainians go shoot the artillery piece out. I don't think they're turning over the laptops that connect to our satellites that give real-time data to the Ukrainians. I think we have U.S., not advisors like in Vietnam, but U.S. people standing around with these things saying, yeah, here are Ukrainians, here bad dudes. And, they're not spotting all of them everywhere all the time, but they're feeding this information to the Ukrainians. So, and we're feeding them huge amounts of money that that the Ukrainians put into crypto, and then the crypto gets put into an investment firm thingy, and that gets stolen. And so, but before it's stolen, all the money's given to Democratic politicians, or it gets stolen. And so, and collapses. But or it's being used to buy American munitions. But so America is rather effective as an ally when they are. So if you can get America as your ally and you can keep them supporting you, you're doing better than other places, because other places, either aren't going to, effectively support you, or depending on who and what it is, but are going to want to more directly control you. The U.S. wants a certain amount of control, but is more willing to, I think, allow a certain level of independence. That's my estimation of what's going on. Yes, we'll take the Ninth Army. Yes, we'll pay the bills. Yes, we want self-propelled, and assault concentration advances. That is here. Keep it going. Yeah. Here. For some reason I didn't schedule these guys to run. Yeah. Just go. Come down and hit him. The only excuse America can ever have for providing its physical strength is that it is in the interest of humanity. Thomas Woodrow Wilson. That guy was a fucking asshole. Woodrow Wilson, the Army or the armed forces were somewhat down the line of desegregation. He resegregates the Army and the Navy. No Air Force yet, but he resegregates those. He supports the Ku Klux Klan. He is the biggest leftist progressive. He does so much harm to the United States that we're still feeling its harm today. Woodrow Wilson was an evil, evil man. So, he was a bastard. And if you're putting Thomas in front of it and somebody else that I don't know who that is, but I just know him as Woodrow Wilson. So, he's a pretty bad dude. That's one of those use flowery, not speaking well. flowery language to justify military action in in his progressive viewpoint. It's the same type of action that a lot of modern presidents, more modern presidents, like nation building and spreading democracy. We're spreading democracy. We want democracy in Egypt because dictator be bad. Mubarak, be bad. Well, what are they going to vote for? Oh, they're going to vote in an Islamic fundamentalist state that it will, maybe every 4 years they'll still have a vote, but yeah, it'll be to, like the Iranian parliament votes to execute thousands of people that were protesting. Yeah, it'll be or hell, hey, yeah, the Germans vote in Hitler, so it's democracy, hooray. Yeah, well, what are the democratically elected government of Germany wants to do? Kill all the Jews. Well, fine, it's democracy. Fuck it. It's good governance that we should be after, and we should be after pro-Western governance. Not, and these people, right and left, because this is both Bush and Clinton and Obama, they all believe that if we just present them with Western democracy, they're going to vote for moderate Western type peoples, because obviously that's the way history is going, and obviously that's the way most humanity believes in. Well, if you look around, most humanity, Africa, India, China, do not have Western democracy, do not believe in Western democracy or Western democratic values or Western civil or Western whatever. And so they'll happily go for the vote because they're all going to vote in some sort of wacky government, at least by my thinking is wacky government. And so they promote up democracy to the point that I'm sick of hearing about democracy because it's just supporting the evil dudes. And I don't care for supporting the evil dudes. And that's what you get with these progressives, like Wilson. Wow, Bulgaria's out here. What the hell is it doing out here? Its navy. I'll take a pro-Western dictator any day over a democratically elected nutjob country like, yeah, Iran is democratically elected. They win democratic elections. I don't care if they win democratic elections. The Iranian government is evil. Let's have the Shah back. He may not be the most, liberally minded person out in the world, fine, and he had prisons. I knew the guy who, literally, I had some courses by the guy who ran the Shah's prisons years and years and years ago after he lost that job and fled to America. But, yeah, that's, so let's bring back the Shah and he can run his secret police and secret prisons and whatnot, fine, because he's going to be a hell of a lot better than anything that's going to democratically be elected in Iran. And so, yeah, this like democracy over sanity is just, Now, hey, if you do have a Western country that is stable, meaning democracy only works when the overwhelming majority of the population agree upon fundamentals, okay? If the population has massive disagreements, Spain, 1930s, democracy isn't going to work because enough of the people do not agree upon what the country is going to be like. So when you have a situation like that, doesn't mean you can't have voting, doesn't mean you can't have democratic representation within government, but you cannot have a majority rule, because you'll have, say, theoretically, a majority of people in cities who believe one thing, and a minority of people, but the majority in their region, of people out in the countryside, say, that produce the food, believe a different thing. And when the cities, because they're in the majority, want to impose their views on the people in the country, and you're going to get a conflict that the majority will claim, well, we are the majority. Most Spaniards believe in X, whatever X is. You know, the church shouldn't own land, or the church should be taxed, or the church should be banned, or whatever it might be. And they may be a majority of Spaniards, but they go, well, we like our local monastery and whatnot. We don't want them gone. We don't want them shot in the night. And so you get a conflict. Democracies don't work when you have huge conflicts over the basis of, you know, of what's going on. Like in America, leading up to the American Civil War, we had a huge fundamental conflict over slavery. Not was it necessarily moral or right, but were we going to allow it in our country? And the only reason it worked as long as it did is we weren't a democracy, because we were a federal constitutional republic that allowed the states to do what they wanted to do. So some states democratically wanted to have slaves. Other states democratically didn't want to have slaves. And it's getting more and more an issue. And of course, slavery is bad and evil. We all know that. But and so we got into a conflict. We got into a civil war, and the Civil War was fought. And now we no longer have slaves, and we have, that decided. Okay, so long as the fundamental element, the more fundamental elements that the overwhelming, it's fine that there's 10% or less of some fringe out right, left, or however you want to describe it, because it's not always right or left. It could be urban versus city or whatever it is. So long as the fringes are just like a small minority that truly, want or don't want something, but as you get 80 to 90% of the people agree upon basic fundamental elements of society. It's just they disagree over tax rates, or should we intervene in this country or that country or whatever. Then you can do democracy reasonably well. But when you have the idea, we'll get back to whether you could be equally said for Afghanistan, but for Iraq, when you have Kurds, you have Shias down here, you have Sunnis all through here, except for in one major huge neighborhood in Baghdad that are Shia. Then you don't have a fundamental agreement on what it is to be Iraqi. So that's why democracies don't always work. Greatest glory of the American Revolution was the inseparable union of principles of civil government and those of inseparable union of principles of civil government and those of Christianity. Yes, Sebastian, yes. The founding fathers believed in the principles of Christianity, I think, to a man. Some are described as deist, though if you look at Thomas Jefferson, who had a personally annotated Bible that he knew backwards and forwards because of the way he annotated it, meaning writing notes in the margin and trying to re-edit it down to other things, and they read other religious books. They weren't all, probably super religious, but they all believed in a God, I would say, the founding father group, and not just like the signers of the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence, but those founding members of society. all agreed upon that, even though there were some Catholics and there were Protestants and different factions of Protestantism. And although they did not want to establish a church of Massachusetts, of the United States, of wherever, like you had the Church of England or Church of Scotland, they didn't want to establish a national religion. They very much believed in the fundamental principles of Christianity as a civil society, not the religious doctrine of, Jesus is God or anything like that, but just the principal messages of Jesus and whatnot. So yes, and America has been moving away from that from various influences, and that is part of the problem that we're having. So yeah, I am not for establishing an American religion like that. Pick your take optics, pick your religious doctrine or belief or whatever. I'm not for establishing a church of that in America. Why am I not seeing? I thought tank. Oh, here it is. Not at all. But the sort of principles. I'm still playing. Paul's trying to keep me on track, I think. Okay, dual purpose anti-tank guns. That, I believe, is over here, and we'll let that continue. Okay, well, I think it's time to push here, because we're getting supplies blown into here. Okay, well, we're going to let them rest up a little bit. They're sitting down here. We're getting ready to clear out this side of the bank. It's Suez. Now the bank of the canal. Oh, our garrison here is being pushed out. Britain doesn't have enough supplies. Okay, we can research more. Hoping my fleets are being rebuilt well enough, or repaired, or however we want to say it. So I've sort of split them up a little bit in the ports so that they weren't overwhelming the port capacity. Gold mining good, 1400. Okay, yeah, we're getting a little lowish. Side shield, something that America did very little of, mostly in the field kind of thing. Germany did a lot, of course. And whatnot. Well, just not decided what to do. And I also just don't have a lot of more army. Okay, we got these guys coming. Those guys coming. Those guys are also these. Okay, these units are all scheduled to go to the Pacific by their nature. They're sort of non-supply, using slow divisions, invasion division. That looking to go to Europe. So yeah, and we're building up fuel stations. God, I don't. Did you start large supply convoys to Suez? Yeah, as soon as for the Battle of Saipan and Tinian, as soon as I can only send supplies to an American-controlled port. So I cannot support I cannot send supplies to British-controlled ports. So I've got to get a supply. I got to get this cleared out so that I can move supplies to here, or if we're going to invade Crete, to here, or now this would be a liberate for Britain, or invade Rhodes, or to be able to invade Sicily or Sardinia, and then be able to supply it once I land here. And they're going to have to come out of America, go around Africa, and then into here. So yeah, it's going to be a little bit. Okay, the Battle of Saipan was fought between June 15th and July 7th, 1944. So actually, we were a little ahead of time for this. Saipan held huge strategic importance for both the Japanese and the Americans. Saipan was part of the Mariana Islands, and its capture would allow the Americans to build runways big enough for its B-29s, Superfortress bombers, to reach the mainland Japan and return to their bases in Saipan. It was also meant that any Japanese forces south of Saipan were cut off from the Japanese mainland itself. The Americans wanted to capture Saipan at all costs, but the Japanese, equally aware of the importance, also prepared to defend the islands. Okay, yes, an amphibious landing on the island was preceded by an intense 2-day bombardment carried out by the U.S. Navy. Over 165,000 shells were fired at the Japanese position on the beaches the Marines were going to land on. The first landings on Saipan took place at 7 a.m. By 9 a.m., 8,000 Marines were ashore. However, they had to fight every inch of the way. The Japanese defenders placed, barbed wire trenches. Machine gun Saipan was declared secured on July 9th. Nearly 30,000 Japanese soldiers had died trying to defend the island. 3,000 Americans were killed, with 13,000 wounded. Fractionally fewer than 25% of the 71,000 American soldiers who landed on Saipan. Small group of Japanese soldiers held out in the mountains until December 45, when they finally accepted that not only the battle was lost, but the war was lost. Okay, yeah, this tells a very interesting story. Tells sort of the several stories, not just what's here. One, the U.S. was able to absorb a 50% casualty rate if you take wounded, not just dead, but wounded, because we have 13,000 wounded out of. Oh, no, I'm sorry, I was doing that out of that. The third Japan. No, out of here. No, so 16,000 out of here. So that's what, about a, not 50%, that's about a 20% casualty rate. They're able to take a 20% casualty rate, which is very high, and still maintain strong support for the war. Now, this wasn't clearly put to the American people, because we did not want to inform Japan of what was going on. But I do think it was understood just that there were heavy casualties within the American public for some of these islands. It was well known that there was heavy casualties on the fighting for Guadalcanal by the American public. So that was well known. And that tells the story that Americans were vehemently for the defeat of Japan. And so long as they had general trust in the American leadership that is going to at least try to do the right thing and learn from mistakes, which is, I would say, very much a fact, whether it's Nimitz's command moving across the Pacific, which is the ones that go after Saipan, or whether it's MacArthur's command that's pushing up, through the island chain, through the major island chains into the Philippines. That both of these commanders are not that they don't make mistakes, not that they don't, invade the wrong beach and get a bunch of soldiers killed up or something, sort of like D-Day, but not that there aren't mistakes and lives are lost, but that it's overall generally a competent command that is doing the best that's practical to be done. The Americans are going to put the trust in the people to do it. So that's one thing that this is telling us. This is also telling us that 30,000 soldiers that are well dug in, and I believe from everything that I know, they're well dug in, including concrete bunkers, concrete fortifications, and as well as more local sourced material fortifications. But they're able to, through aerial bombardment, through offshore artillery, through firepower on the ground, overwhelm Japan. Japan cannot, that's basically sort of 3 divisions worth of soldiers there, depending on their size of division, of course, but cannot hold off, push off. And there's also army soldiers on there. It's not just the Marines. Marines are sort of first ashore, but there's a couple army divisions involved in that, I believe, that are not able to hold off. And so it just, American firepower, whether it's the M1 Garand, the Thompson submachine gun, the flamethrower, or whether it's, like I say, the artillery and the aircraft, Japan just cannot keep up with modern industrial warfare, no matter what they do. It's just their fighting spirit. The average Japanese soldier is reasonably well trained, and because we see approximately 95% plus casualty rates, dead, that their morale is strong enough to fight hard. So reasonably well trained, not greatly well trained, because we talked earlier about training problems that they have. They don't have lots of extra ammo just to go spend on training and whatnot, but they, reasonably well trained. Their equipment just is not, I have a couple of Arisaka rifles. I have an Nambu pistol, and they're okay. And as bolt action rifles, they're okay. The early one that's sort of, pre-Pacific War is rather nicely made. The one that's sort of early Pacific War is getting a little rough, and it's nowhere. I don't have a last ditch, one of the, 1945 or 44 manufactured ones, but, they're getting rougher as time goes on. That they just can't industrially keep up. They just don't have the bullets to just, lay down continuous suppressive fire on the enemy to keep them suppressed. They just can't do it. And so you have multiple types of wars. On these big wars, I sort of can define them as 2 types. One is maneuver and decision, and the other is attrition. Obviously, the classic example of attrition is the World War I fronts. But we can see maneuver and decision. Maneuver and decision, where a smaller and numerically and technologically, potentially, or partially weaker force can defeat a bigger, better, bigger force. In where you have, because I'm trying to be careful with my words here, where you have the German army, because it is mobile, because it can communicate, its tanks can communicate with each other, where the French not necessarily, and mostly not, are able to, with more motorization, concentrated, are able to defeat and take down a larger French army that has, in some ways, better tanks, but most, independent, if you're counting Panzer IIs and you're counting Panzer Is in there, which those make up the majority of tanks for Germany, the French tanks are better because their light tanks, the R-35 and the H-35, well, they have both a machine gun and a crappy, but still a 37 millimeter gun on it, and thicker armor. Now the Panzer II just has, or Panzer I just has 2 men, and so Panzer III, or 2 men in an R-35 or an H-35, so arguably equal or better tanks that the French have and whatnot. So we could argue that the French are better off, but they don't have radios, they don't have good command and control over their forces, so they get defeated. So that is, decision and maneuver can defeat your enemy. So if the war, Barbarossa, if that had stated decision and maneuver and defeating the Soviets before they can produce more you know, trained men and produced more tanks and artillery shells, fight with what's on day one, Germany can win. But once it becomes a war of attrition, certainly unlike Hitler's trying to make it like World War One, but the German High Command wants to keep it a war of maneuver. But none of the maneuvers are going to be so big that they're going to create a decision that's going to change the outcome of the war. It's just going to be more effective wars of attrition. Using maneuver within a war of attrition, the Germans are going to lose. When we're talking, once you lose naval supremacy and you're talking islands and isolated elements like this, you're talking it's attrition. And Japan, and yes, it's not just one guy equals one guy on either side. If you've got a guy with an M1 Garand and he has firepower from offshore and he has maybe mortars and even light 75 millimeter howitzers on land, he's going to do a lot better than the guy who has a light howitzer. Some of them maybe 75, but some of them I think are like 37 millimeter howitzers, real weak infantry guns. But they've only got like 10 rounds per gun or 20 rounds or 40 rounds per gun. And once they shoot up that gun, it's now just a big ornament, big chunk of metal. It's no longer any good. Where the Americans can send in more ammo, more ammo, more ammo, more ammo. So, they've lost it. And so this shows that America's firepower is making the war of attrition very winnable, if you will. And whoa, hello, OCB. Nuclear weapons turned the great power war into collective suicide-making pursuit of world supremacy by military means impossible. I entirely disagree with you there, Sebastian. I entirely disagree with that. Global thermonuclear war might be suicide, but we're going to see. Okay, I saw a quote once. Hello, OCB. If any Western army had the dedication, morale, and willingness to lay down their lives in the cause as a Japanese soldier, that the Western army would become invincible. Well, that's what Hitler believed. Okay, that's what Hitler believed. But Hitler's Germany did not have the production ability. Hitler's Germany could not produce enough rifle and machine gun bullets. So that's a major Western power. Hitler believed that. Hitler's wrong. Firepower wins. Production is essential for firepower. That's what we're seeing with the war in Ukraine. Ukraine staved off the initial assault. Ukraine would have been collapsed by now, entirely collapsed by now, had it not been a continuous pouring in of munitions into Ukraine. And currently, especially in the high-tech area, but currently either taking old munitions, and not so much like the Soviets, or sorry, I said Soviets because I was sort of getting rid of it. The Russians are still, sometimes are breaking out World War II dated ammunition for this war in Ukraine, or so video and screenshots seem to show, or at least 1950s ammo. Now realize we may be still dropping Vietnam era made bombs that we put, and we definitely were back in the second invasion of Iraq, and we may still have a bunch of them, that we put smart bomb caps onto the nose of these bombs that we're dropping, but they were made during the Vietnam era. So yes, that was obviously in the 2000s. I don't know if we still have a back storage of these or not. I just don't know. But we were definitely in the two invasions of Afghanistan still using these weapons. So yeah, we have stockpiles of stored weapons from long ago that we're still using. But production, and this is teaching our Western arms producers and our Western nations to keep more arms production capability. Whether the factories are turned on or not is another question, because we see the rapid use of smart munitions, anti-tank missiles and whatnot. that Russia cannot keep up with the Western powers effectively. And so production is a critical element. Germany had an excellent army. It could not produce enough weapons or munitions to combat the Americans. And no matter what their morale is, the firepower will win. Firepower defeats morale, just as like we're showing on these islands. That because these islands are big enough that it's no longer like an isolated, engagement. And there was also took quite a while to fully pacify, invading Guam, because that was a fairly biggish island. But here, these are big enough that there's not quite, well, more or less sort of continental type battles, and inland far enough that you're no longer getting naval gunfire support. And the Japanese could move into here. And the Japanese could feed themselves. There's plenty of food, at least at the time. Japan, and probably the Philippines entirely, produced enough food to support itself with its population. So unlike the guys out here that were starting to starve, and the army was literally building submarines, not with torpedoes and able to go sink other ships, but submarines that were able to, at least during the day, submerge and not be seen, and come through and surface, enough at night to run their diesel engines, to get in and bring in food and other basic keep us alive stuff going here, and then heading back to Japan. So minimum supply submarines. But the army is able to supply themselves here, not with new munitions, not like, bullet and rifle, machine gun and rifle production bullets or artillery production, but food and that kind of things, and new clothes. They're making enough, cloth to replace worn out uniforms or something like that, but they're not making, the hardware of warfare here, but enough, and the Americans are able to defeat them. And if you would have stuck to it's not going to do it. I'm sorry, it's not. Firepower wins. Best tactic against an overwhelming enemy is skillful flexibility and relentless harassment. Those are absolutely good tactics, and you have to have that flexibility. Germany had the flexibility, and the only people that could match Germany was Britain and America in flexibility. Russia could not. The reason Russia does as well is interference, particularly by Hitler. And I know TIK, and I've watched only parts of his really nice videos dealing with the Stalingrad campaign. And there's debate over whether, if immediately once the collapse of the flanks happened, I believe Paulus could have broken out if that would have been a wholeheartedly supported tactic. Maybe it's just my, wearaboo-ness or whatever, belief that the German army is that good. But because of delays and whatnot, and hold out, okay, finally we'll let you break out. No, and it doesn't work. But maybe it couldn't have broken out, but I think it could have. There's maybe good arguments, people looking at it know it better than I do, but it's the high command that's making it more and more of a rigid campaign, and their flexibleness just pulls them out of disaster, and allows them to make limited successes that delay the Soviet eventual push. So the three flexible armies of any size, I'm not talking about some little army somewhere, a Free French division somewhere or something. I'm talking about armies of scale and size. The three flexible are Britain, Germany, and America. And you're right about that. Well, I think we're going to come to the end of this episode. I want to thank everyone who's made it this far. If you have, please post your comments, questions, suggestions below. Love all of you guys. And I hope everyone has hit that like button. And of course, if you're new here, you made it this far, I hope you've subscribed to hear my brilliance, of course, because I'm brilliant and know everything. And if you don't get the sarcasm and whatnot there, trust me, I know I don't know everything, but I'm fairly well informed. So thank you. Hope it's been fun and entertaining. See you next time for more. Yes, more Hearts of